here's 19. Let's find the remaining functions. So we know, what do we know? We know tangent is -2. I'll do secant first because we have an identity for secant. Secant squared x is 1 plus tangent squared x. This is just an identity. We also know that it's in this quadrant on the left. And the main thing this tells me is what's positive and what's negative. So on this left quadrant, quadrant 2, if you remember the all students take calculus, this basically tells me sine is the only positive one, which means that cosecant is also positive because cosecant is 1 over sine. Other than that, the remaining functions will be negative. So secant will be negative. So let's plug in. So we get secant squared is 1 plus -2 squared. So 1 plus 4, or 5. So secant squared is 5. So secant would be the square root of 5. And then in this case, we have to decide between positive or negative. It'll be negative because of the quadrant that we're in. So secant x is negative square root 5. And then I would probably do cosine next because I know cosine is 1 over secant. So cosine would just be 1 over negative, oops, would be 1 over negative root 5 or negative 1 over root 5. And then you could probably find the rest. So cotangent, I would probably use 1 over tangent. What else do we need? Sine and cosecant are going to be a little trickier. Sine, you can use, there's probably multiple identities. I would probably just use sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. So sine squared is 1 minus cosine squared. And then is sine positive or negative when we take the square root? Sine is positive in this quadrant. So sine squared is 1 minus 1 over root 5 squared. That's coming from cosine. So 1 minus 1/5. Yeah. So 4/5. So sine squared is 4/5. And so we take the square root plus or minus. We're going to keep the positive one because we're in the second quadrant. Sine is the y value, so sine is positive here. And we get 2 over root 5. And then I'll let you find cosecant because that's just 1 over sine. So hopefully this gets everyone started.